What is going on, my Pardon My Pancreas listeners and watchers? Thank you so much for tuning in to another episode. And today, for those of us who are in the States, like myself, we got a holiday coming up, and I want to talk to you about how to keep your blood sugar stable and cooperative with these holiday meals. All right, let's get into our theme song. I've spent the last 10 years pushing the limits while identifying trends and patterns in my type 1 diabetes management. Follow along as I learn, apply, and share the fitness, nutrition, and lifestyle strategies that I've learned from diabetes experts around the world. The real question is, how can we live fearlessly with diabetes while maintaining stable blood sugars? This podcast is here to give you the answer. My name is Matt Vandervecht, head coach and co-founder of FTF Warrior, and welcome to Pardon My Pancreas. All right, so we're gonna start this one off with a little bit of a story. Okay, so a couple years ago, maybe like 5 years ago, we're sitting down for the holidays, and this specific situation is Thanksgiving. Of course, the American tradition is basically any holiday, you eat too much and then you go take a nap. You spend time with family, right? But it was Thanksgiving, and we're up in Big Bear, California. It's up in the mountains, so there's it's a fresh layer of snow. It had just snowed, and it doesn't always happen that way, but there's snow outside. We had a great snowball fight with the whole family, and we all come indoors for the afternoon Thanksgiving meal. And for some reason, our tradition is that we eat meals, or dinner specifically, early. You start at like 3 o'clock and you just kind of have one big meal, and then you kind of eat a second meal somewhere in there around 5 or 6, who knows. But that one big meal, that's the main event for the whole day, right? You get down to the living room, and we've got our extended family there. And it's just this amazing layout, this huge spread of a feast. And we're like, wow, there's turkey, there's ham, there's mashed potatoes, there's cranberry sauce, there's this kind of carrots and sweet potatoes and marshmallows, and there's all this other great food out in front of us. And of course my eyes get massive. I'm like, oh, this looks delicious. I cannot wait to dig into it. Now, of course, at this point, 5 years ago, I've already been diagnosed with type 1 diabetes, and I'm a couple years into it, kind of figured it out, kind of not. And go through our meal. I'm MDI at that point, so I take out my needle. I kind of like sort of secretly inject. I'm still a little bit wary of people seeing me with needles. I'm uncomfortable with it, but I'm starting to get used to it. So with it being extended family, I'm like, okay, maybe they haven't seen me do this before. Maybe they have. Let's just kind of sneak it under the table, right? I take my shot, start enjoying my food, and it is amazing. Right? My mouth's watering just thinking about it. I got this juicy ham we're putting inside of like these Hawaiian buns, and you make little mini sandwiches out of the meat and the spreads, and oh, so good. But then what happens, about an hour later-ish, you get the spike. The blood sugar spike. And I'm not talking about spiked tea or spiked juice or whatever they have. I don't even know. My family never really did that. But the blood sugar spike and having to deal with that, right? So what we have is after that meal, you notice you've got a bit of a spike, and like, okay, darn, whatever, I guess I messed up the pre-bolus. But then it stays up there. It doesn't come back down. And so, 2-3 hours later, you're like, why am I still at 250, 300, 350, whatever it's at? It's not coming down. I took a correction shot and nothing's moving. See, the problem that I didn't realize in that moment, and it took me a few more years to fully understand the basis of this concept, is macronutrients, or in other words, carbohydrates, proteins, and fats, are going to affect your blood sugars differently. And when you combine higher amounts of all three, i.e. holiday meals, right? We got mashed potatoes, we've got the ham, the turkeys, you got carbs, fats, proteins, there's butter on everything, right? When you combine high amounts of those three macronutrients, which those are the macronutrients, but when you combine high amounts of those, it makes blood sugars a bit more difficult to control. Now, I can't go too deep into this. I literally have like 6 minutes until my next coaching call that I'm running for my clients, but within macronutrients, they're going to affect blood sugars differently. Carbohydrates, typically, you will see a spike. It's the strongest correlation between blood sugar spikes and a need for insulin, right? So we have an insulin to carb ratio. As you get into fats and proteins, they are slower absorbing, like the fats themselves actually delay gastric emptying. In other words, they delay that spike of blood sugars because they're slowing down the absorption in your stomach. But when you mix those in this big mixing pot, right, a resulting blood sugar is oftentimes going to be frustrating because you have the spike and then you have the delayed rise. So even when you're taking that extra insulin, right, when I was giving corrections at 2 hours and 3 hours, I was still in a slow rising process because the proteins and the fats slowing down the absorption. So even while taking corrections, my blood sugars did not budge. It took hours for them to come finally back down slowly and surely. And so when you're looking at holiday meals this week, I know that in the US, we've got Thanksgiving coming up, right? In 2 days. When you're looking at those meals, it's not that you can't have it, okay? Eat the food. Enjoy the food. Do not let diabetes hold you back, but have the right strategies, okay? You should be incorporating a pre-bolus to help mitigate that spike from the carbohydrates. You might need to take a secondary shot, maybe an hour, maybe 2 hours later, to cover the proteins and the fats, that delayed absorption, right? So understand that when you mix carbs, fats, and proteins, especially at higher amounts, because when we gorge ourselves on food, we get the big carbs, the big fats, the big proteins, it can get messy. But if you have the right strategy going into it, you can really set yourself up for success. So look at the ratio of carbs versus fats versus proteins. If your meal is mostly carbohydrates with minimal fats, minimal proteins, you're going to need most, if not all, of your insulin up front with a strong pre-bolus. But the more fattier and proteinier, I know it's not a word, but the more fats and proteins you have in your meal, the more likely you are to need an extended bolus on a pump, or dual wave, square wave, whatever you want to call it. If you're MDI, you might need a second shot that hour after, right? Like I had to do the correction shots, but if you can plan ahead for that, then that slower absorption, you'll be able to kind of knock it down as you get further along those Thanksgiving meals. Now, when you've got high values of every macronutrient, high carbs, high fats, high proteins, you're gonna have to mix these strategies, and obviously you're gonna have to find out what works best for you, because we are all a bit different, we are unique. You're gonna have to find what's known as your personalized macronutrient profile, okay? Now, you're not gonna figure this out in the next 2 days. In fact, you're not gonna figure it out if you Google it, because it doesn't exist outside of our programs. But the general concept behind personalized macronutrient profiles is understanding strategies that are unique to you, and understanding how you can eat what you want, when you want, and still see stable blood sugars. Now, of course, this comes with a basic understanding of carbs versus fats versus proteins. You have to know how those work. And once you do, you start to look for patterns, okay? Once you can isolate patterns, you're able to predict where blood sugars are gonna go, and then you revisit your initial strategies to map out your blood sugar plan. Okay, so looking ahead at Thanksgiving, you're likely going to have high carb, high fat, and high protein. Make sure you get a pre-bolus. Make sure you're considering that either extended bolus or a secondary shot if you're MDI, looking into those strategies that you can use for yourself to, of course, keep blood sugars cooperating so you can focus more on your family, focus more on enjoying time in that moment, okay? Creating new memories, enjoying the holidays, for goodness gracious. And the last tip I want to give you guys, outside of the personalized macronutrient profile, which again is unique to our program, is movement. Movement's going to be a key to keeping your blood sugars in range. If you start noticing a rise that either you didn't expect or you want to take care of in that moment, gather your family, say, hey, who wants to go for a walk? Who wants to go have a snowball fight? Who wants to do something active so that for you, you can help bring your blood sugars back down, okay? Now, of course, be cautious if you have large amounts of insulin on board, because it might come crashing down, but use movement to your benefit, okay? Now, for these holidays, obviously, 2 days from now, you don't have enough time to map out your perfect blood sugar plan, but if you are looking to use the next 8 weeks to mapping out and predicting where your blood sugars are gonna go so that you can focus more on creating memories, spending time with your family, actually enjoying the food that you're putting into your mouth, I want you to take a look at our free training at diabetesinaction.com. It's about 30 to 40 minutes long. I guarantee you it will open your eyes to new strategies that are available, including the personalized macronutrient profile. All right, so go check out that free training, diabetesinaction.com. I got to bounce and hop on the phone with one of our clients in that program, and be sure to take some notes. Be sure to have an open mind about new strategies that you could possibly use, even for this Thanksgiving. Have a great day. Head over to diabetesinaction.com right now. Watch that quick training, and I'll see you there. Keep up the fight.